الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. This is a very tough topic, a very heavy topic, and to deal with it in the morning, very early morning, might be a bit difficult. But I'll make it short. This is just an introduction. I cannot, of course, go into a lot of details about it. But I have decided to present this topic when I was asked to say something this morning, because I want you to get familiar with, the various ways of looking at the Quran. It is not just reading it in a general way and getting a general understanding of the meanings of it, but looking at it deeper and deeper. There are various techniques, various ways in doing that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do tadabbur of the Quran. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. And what is tadabbur? It is deep reflection on the Quran. And so it has to be looked at from a variety of different angles for us to really get the message from it. Those who have memorized the Quran or memorized portions of it, they are, in a sort of better position to be able to do that, because you have to compare how the Quran uses various words and expressions in different places, in different surahs and so on. So if you already have that in your heart, in your mind, you can more easily compare them. But the other thing that is needed in understanding the Quran is the Arabic language itself. If you do not know anything of the Arabic language, it becomes very, very difficult. Even when you read translations, you do not get the full meanings from translations. You have to study it to some extent, at least through the Arabic. So every Muslim really should embark on the project of studying the Arabic language, grammatically and otherwise, in order to get a better understanding of the Quran. The Arabic language is the key to understanding it. Linguistic expressions or tools, adawat, as it is said in Arabic, adawat. These are linguistic tools in trying to understand the Quran. Linguistic tools that are used in the Quran itself, and I have a list, and all of these are taken from Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, a wonderful book about Ulum al-Quran that was written many centuries ago by Imam As-Suyuti. And he has written many other books beside this one, Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran. Al-Itqan, I'm not sure if the whole of it is translated into English. I know it is there in Urdu, so perhaps online you can get a translation of it in Urdu. But it's a very important book with various ulum or sciences, meaning studies in order to understand the message and the meaning of the Quran. So just by way of introduction, to give you a brief idea of some of the topics that he has as the headings for various chapters. Al-Mantuq wal-Mafhum, meaning what is explicit and what is implicit. Explicit is what is spoken and what is not spoken, what is understood. Al-Mantuq wal-Mafhum. Al-Haqiqa wal-Majaz, real, what is used in a real sense and what is used in a metaphorical sense. Al-Tashbih wal-Isti'ara. It's difficult to translate some of these words. I don't know the English equivalent of some of them. Tashbih means likening something to another, or similitudes or similes. Isti'ara, it's a type of metaphor also. Kinaya wa ta'rif, these are all various types of metaphors. Al-Hasru wal-Ikhtisas. Al-Hasru means completely mentioning something completely, not excluding any individual from the group. So a complete limiting the expression that is it's very, very difficult to explain. Ikhtisas is like this, mentioning things in a specific way, specifying or specification. Al-ijaz wal-itnab, mentioning things briefly or mentioning them at length, talking briefly just in a few words or explaining things using many words. And they say in Al-Balagha, somebody said Al-Balaghatu hiya al-ijaz. Al-Balaghatu hiya al-ijaz. Balagha, you probably know the word already, the proper usage of the language, rhetoric and so on. It is in being brief, al-ijaz, being brief. But somebody said, okay, instead of saying al-balaghatu hiya al-ijaz, you just say al-balaghatu al-ijaz. This is making it even more brief, right? Al-balaghatu al-ijaz. So al-ijaz wal-itnab, either saying things just in a few words or in longer expressions. Amthal al-Quran, this is all things like similes and proverbs and parables and stories and so on. A lot of things come under this heading of Amthal al-Quran. Aqsam al-Quran, the swearing, wa shamsi wa duhaha wa layla, and so on. That's a technique of the language. Al-mujmal wal-mubayyan, something is mentioned briefly, but it's different than ijaz. Briefly, and mubayyan means explained. Nasikh wa mansukh, this is not exactly a linguistic tool as such. It's more like shari'i tool. What is abrogated, what is the abrogating verse. Al-muhkam wal-mutashabih, this is also like that. Not exactly a linguistic tool, but muhkam, what is clear, and al-mutashabih, what is allegorical. Al-muqaddam wal-mu'akhkhar, or at-taqdim wa-ta'khir. The language has a way of the words flowing in a sentence. And if you reverse the order, put the order of the words in a different way. As you know, like for example, in Arabic, the verb should come before the subject. The verb comes before the subject, whereas in Urdu, the verb comes at the end of the sentence. In English, the verb comes after the subject. So different languages have different ways of expressing it. So if the order is changed, and this is called a taqdim wa ta'khir, then there has to be some meaning behind it. And then there is also a takrar, repetition in the Quran, and at-taraduf. Taraduf, synonyms. The usage, not the usage, but the study of what may be considered as synonyms in the Quran. That is, what's a synonym? A synonym or synonyms are two words that have the same meaning. If two words have the same meaning, then they are called synonyms, mutaradif, mutaradifain. And to study that in the Quran, and that's the one that I want to concentrate on, but I'll just mention a few things about this. Why is there repetition in the Quran? Perhaps we read and we see things repeated in the Quran, and there are others, and like Orientalists and so on, who have studied the Quran. They have seen things repeated in the Quran, and they say that they accuse the Quran of useless repetition. Is repetition always useless? Repetitions are not always useless. There is a purpose behind repetition. But when you look more closely at the Quran, is there really repetition in the Quran? Or every time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something, there is a different meaning in it. It looks like the same words are used, but maybe there is a different meaning, additional meaning. For example, أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَىٰ هُدًى مِّن رَّبِّهِمْ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. those are upon guidance from their Lord, and those are the successful. The word those is repeated, ulaika, ulaika. But in a verse like this, it must be repeated. You cannot leave out the word in the second place and say, ulaika ala hudam min rabbihim wa humul muflihun. The meaning would not be the same. The impact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to have in our mind, the understanding of certain things and so on, the word has to be used, has to be repeated. And in the second example in Surah Al-Baqarah also, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. And of the people are some who say we believe in Allah and in the last day, but they are not believers. Where's the repetition here? Which words are repeated here in this ayah? It is the preposition billahi wa bil yawmil akhir. Now, linguistically, you can say billahi wal yawmil akhir, and that is there in other parts of the Quran. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. You can say آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. The meaning would not change. Is there a reason for the be here, which is the preposition in Allah and in the last day? Is there a reason for it being repeated? And let me say briefly, yes, but to go into an explanation of all of these things would take up a lot of time. So I'm not doing that. I'm just presenting some things to you. We see in Surah Ar-Rahman the ayah repeated, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, starting with verse 13, repeated 31 times in this surah. And I was reading an article about it, and that article, of course, in Arabic, and it says that the first 8 times it comes after Allah mentions the wonders of His creation. He mentions some huge creations of His, and 8 times after mentioning those creations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. So, raising this question so you can think about it, looking at those creations that He has created. 7 times mentioned after Jahannam, and Jahannam has 7 gates. 8 times mentioned after the first 2 gardens that are mentioned, and Jannah has 8 gates. And 8 times again after the mention of the second 2 gardens, and that makes it 31 in all. And in every case where the ayah is used, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is drawing your attention to different ala of His, different favors of His. So it is like if in every time the ayah is repeated, it's a new ayah, because it is drawing your attention to something different in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in Surah Al-Mursalat, وَيْلٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْمُكَذِّبِينَ is repeated 10 times. And look at it again. The entire surah is a description of the Akhirah, and especially like hellfire. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says over and over, woe that day to the deniers. وَيْلٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلْمُكَذِّبِينَ. That day which is being described as the day of Qiyamah, and more specifically the punishment. So woe that day unto the deniers. Now, this is the one that I want to concentrate on a little, and of course we don't want to take up the entire time. We have this little ceremony after that, inshallah. The synonyms, الترادف, مترادف and مترادفين, 2 words that have the same meanings. This is a study that I think was not done so much in the past. There was some mention of it, some discussion on it, but in these days we see a greater interest in it. Are there really synonyms in the Quran? Does one word mean exactly the same as another word? If there are 2 different words in the Quran that seem to have the same meaning, do they really have the same meaning? or are the meanings different? And the position that many scholars today have taken is that there are no synonyms in the Quran. No two words have exactly the same meaning in the Quran. Although in translation you may see the meanings being the same. And in tafsir also, take for example this tafsir in Tafsir al-Jalalain. This is how the earlier scholars, in order to be brief, explain the Quran. They may explain a word in the Quran or in an ayah with another word that may be more easily understood in the Arabic language. So in Tafsir al-Jalalain, I'm not sure if Jalalain means the two Jalals here, right? Who wrote this Tafsir? Jalalain is two Jalals. Jalaluddin al-Suyuti and Jalaluddin al-Mahalli. Al-Mahalli. Two of them, one of them started it, the next one completed this Tafsir. So I don't know which of the two says this, from the beginning. La rayba fi, la shakka fi. La rayb, la shak.